worship.
Hey guys, Bible with Mike here, where we read the Bible and try to maybe learn something along the way. In last, we read Genesis chapters 1 and 2. Today, that moves us on to 3 and 4. Now, 3 and 4 are very interesting, Genesis 3 and 4, because they're probably some of the most famous books of the Bible, or chapters of the Bible. Everybody knows the story, of course, of Cain and Abel and of the serpent in the garden. So we're kind of seeing what's known in chapter 3 as the origin of sin. Now, the interesting thing about chapter 3 is even though it is the origin of sin, or referred to by scholars that way, the word sin is not mentioned until chapter 4, where they're actually addressing Cain, and we'll see that. So again, I'm taking notes. I encourage everybody else to do the same. This will be unedited. You guys will see this raw. We're going to be experiencing God together. Please drop the comments in the comment section. Subscribe for more of these. I'm going to do this every single day until we get ourselves through the Bible. So hopefully you guys can help me learn, and maybe I can learn, or maybe you can learn something as well. So interestingly, before we begin, if we look again at chapter 2, the very last verse, I'd like to start there. It says, "And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." So the word for naked in Hebrew is arumim, and the word for for crafty is arum. So it's kind of interesting, since we're talking about the origin of sin, that there's a Hebrew pun that ends chapter 2 and begins chapter 3, where it talks about the arumim of man, the nakedness, and the arum, the craftiness of sin. Those words are very similar. But again, we'll continue on. Chapter 3. "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God hath made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God had said, Ye shall not eat, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die." So God told them, you can eat of anything. This whole garden, everything you can think of. Think if you can think of any food in the whole world. You can have anything in the whole world, but God says, you know what? Don't eat cotton candy. Well, part of you are like, man, I really want cotton candy, dang. But the other parts of you would be like, man, that's not that hard of a sacrifice. I can probably deal without that. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. That's kind of the first example of the craftiness of sin. "For God doth know that in the day ye eat, that your eyes shall be open, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil," saying that when you eat this, you're going to know just as much as God does. "And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit and did eat, and gave also to her husband with her, that he did eat." So Eve fell into sin, ate from the tree, gave some to her husband. Adam also ate from the tree. "And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons." So this is some consciousness. They're aware of the fact that they are naked. They no longer had that innocence of mind where they didn't notice that. And obviously we can see that like in children. There came a time where my nieces would run around naked, and then one day it clicked in their brains like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. It just comes with the maturity of age and the consciousness of the fact that that's no longer an innocent act. In verse 8, "And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves amongst the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden." This was probably the first instance of shame. "And the Lord God called unto Adam and said, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." And this is where we notice. "And he said, Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that you shall not eat? And the man said, The woman who you gave me, she gave me the tree, and I did eat." So Adam tries to throw his wife under the bus. "The woman who you gave to me," and honestly kind of in a way throwing God under the bus. "You gave her to me, and she led me to sin." Number 13, "And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is it that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above the cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. So a lot of scholars believe that the serpent, the snake that we know today, was actually a really beautiful creature that walked bipedally, so it walked on its legs. And at this moment, this was God cursing the serpent to forever be a slithering creature. Verse 15. So 3:15 is the first example of what's called proto-evangelium, or the first prophecy. And we'll see that. This is God telling the serpent about the future that it's going to have. I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. That's talking about future prophecy. That's permanence. Upon the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of your wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Meaning, with work, you're now going to till the land to earn the food that you eat. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. So you're going to have to deal with thorns and thistles. And, presumably before this, those things didn't exist. In the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken, for dust you are, and dust you shall remain. Or in dust you shall return. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Unto Adam also, and to his wife, did the Lord God make coats of skins, and clothe them. This is kind of symbolic as well. So it's kind of like a first sacrifice in a way. So you think about it, Adam and Eve made themselves fig leaf clothes, and fig leaves, obviously, what are they going to do? They're going to wilt. So God, because of that sin, was kind of forced to make them clothing made out of skins. So it's kind of believed or implied that there was animal sacrifice, that sin, obviously requiring, we can see the future of that in the Hebrew parables, in the Hebrew law, is that sacrifice was required, obviously, for the covering of that sin. And verse 22 and 3, and the Lord God said, behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, which are, they're like basically angels, but they're the defending angels. They look like kind of an old-fashioned soldier, you would imagine, with just a big flaming sword. And even it mentions that, in a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. So that's the end of chapter 3. A lot of things happen there. And again, chapter 3 is kind of known as the origin of sin, because we can see that first sin happening. But we don't see the word sin until we read through chapter 4. And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. So I want to draw some attention really quick to verse 1 and 2. So if you look at 1 and 2, some people believe that Cain and Abel may have actually been twins, because it mentions for Cain that he was conceived and that she gave birth. But then when Abel, it just says she gave birth to him also, meaning that it could have come directly after that first initial conception, and she had twins. Other people obviously believe Cain older, Abel younger brother, and that they came later, but it's just kind of interesting, the phrasing of that, if you read the Hebrew. So again, just telling you, because I'm looking at the Hebrew as well, something that I noticed, that some scholars mention that they could have potentially been twins. They also mention the interesting names. Cain is to acquire and possess, where Abel, his brother, or Hevel, means to breathe, means vapor and vanity. It's kind of indicative that Cain would seek to acquire and possess, but Abel would be more about the breath of God, and it suggested that he was going to be temporary. Kind of an interesting thing. But again, moving on, chapter 4, verse 3. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought the fruit. So let me put this in front of me. And it came in process of time. It came to pass that Cain brought to the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect for Abel to his offering. But unto Cain and his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And why would that be? Because Cain was giving fruit, whereas Abel was making animal sacrifice. And again, we can see the importance of this as the Hebrew law is truly defined. And I'm sure these men at the time would have known this God was speaking directly to them. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? Why are you sad? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So sin is knocking, it's lurking at your door, Cain. I can see the evil behind you. I can see the evil with your intentions. You're not doing this with a pure heart. Not only are you sacrificing the wrong thing, but you're sacrificing the wrong thing with a heavy laden heart. And Cain talked with his brother Abel, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. So the Lord knew what happened, came to Cain, and wanted honesty from him. 11. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from its face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that any one that findeth me shall slay me. So he's saying, You've cursed me. This isn't just a curse of sending me out of the garden. You've sent me so that anybody who sees me is going to know that I killed my brother. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him shall kill him. So a lot of people think that the mark of Cain was actually supposed to be a punishment, but in a lot of ways it was more of a warning for other people that this man was marked by God, and that if anyone were to take vengeance against him, so vengeance is the Lord's, and it says it very clearly many times in the Bible, but any man to take vengeance against Cain by killing him would have sevenfold justice dealt to them. So 7 times as bad would it be dealt to you. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod in the east of Eden. So Cain, funny enough, being a wanderer traveler, actually created the first city that we know kind of by the definition of city today, and that would be Enoch, his son. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. I guess I could have just read that instead of telling you. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad beget Mehujael, and Mehujael beget Methusael, and Methusael beget Lamech. And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of one was Adah, and the name of the other Jelah. And Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. So we can see the descendants actually of Cain are pretty interesting. So Jabal, he was the father of those that dwelt in tents, and of such that have cattle. So modern farmers. Number 21, and his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of such as handle the harp and organ, so the father of arts and music. And Jelah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. So Tubal-Cain, the father of modern day, like steelworking, he worked with bronze and iron. And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth, for God. That's his name. That's what Seth means. So God is saying, Adam and Eve, after losing Abel and Cain at this point, because Cain obviously was sent out from the garden, were sent away from Adam and Eve and forced to wander, they bared themselves another son, Seth, and they made sure to honor God with the birth of their son Seth, naming him truly for God. Hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, who Cain slew. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. So, a lot of stuff happened. A lot of stuff in chapters 3 and 4. And before we move on, obviously, to read chapter 5, we probably should dive into it a little bit. So we again talk about all of his children. We have Jabal, who is the father of farmers. We have Jubal, who is the father of arts and music. And then Tubal-Cain was the father of metalwork, and that would be mostly bronze and iron, because at the time that would be what was available to them. I think I covered my notes for the most part, but again, just to kind of briefly summarize, we got Genesis 3, which is known as the origin of sin. So guys, please, if you're taking notes, Genesis 3 was known as the origin of sin. Interestingly enough, the word sin is not actually mentioned until 4. I think it's 4 verse 8. It might be 4:7. The Hebrew for naked is arumim, A-R-U-M-M-I-M, whereas crafty is arum. So arumim. It's very, very closely related words. And in Hebrew, that was used to make puns. Usually if you had two words that sounded very similar in Hebrew text, it's because they were playing off of each other. You wanted to draw attention to the fact that those words sound very similar and have different meanings. The first sacrifice is also kind of shown, where Jesus gave Adam and Eve coats of skin. But then also we can see that the names Cain and Abel, Cain and Hevel, mean, acquire and possess, but also breath, meaning one was meant to acquire and possess and desired to acquire and possess, and the other one was more of a temporary vapor. The cool thing about Cain and Abel is, though they were brothers, there is some speculation that they could have been twins. If that's the case, it proves that their relationship maybe was even closer. I'm not sure if you guys have met twins. I have. Twins usually tend to have a way closer bond than just a standard brother and brother. And again, Cain's children. We talked about that. So we can see the truth of 3:15 being the first prophecy where God actually spoke and said, this is what's going to happen. All the days of your life you will toil. And we can see serpents now obviously slither on their bellies. Guys, I really appreciate you guys tuning in with me. We're going to go through Genesis 5 and start with some genealogy and stuff tomorrow. I really am going to keep this going. Please, please, please subscribe. Give me some feedback and comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.